I sat across from them in that stale little conference room, pretending like I didn't already know something bad was coming. You could smell it. That weird corporate air, too much carpet cleaner and fear. The lights hummed. A cheap coffee maker sat in the corner sputtering. One dying ficus leaned in the corner like it wanted to quit too. Claire Jenkins from HR sat with her big glasses, peering into a manila folder like she was about to tell me I'd won a cruise. "Walter," she said, her voice way too soft. "We've completed the compensation realignment review." I knew that phrase. I'd seen it float through the company's Slack channels like a ghost for weeks. But I didn't expect what came next. "Your new compensation package will be $62,000 annually." I stared at her, then at Gerald Vance, our new division head from Daxon, who couldn't tell a network switch from a microwave. He didn't even look up from his tablet. Just scribbled something like this was completely routine. I did the math in my head. From 155,000 down to 62,000, that's a 60% pay cut, and they didn't even offer a single explanation. I could feel the heat rising in my neck, but I didn't give them the satisfaction of raising my voice. I just nodded once, closed my notepad, and said, "I'll think it over," like they were offering me a choice between chicken or beef for lunch, not cutting the floor out from under my entire life. Claire smiled like I had just agreed to share a piece of cake. She slid the folder across the table. "It is effective immediately," she said. "Effective immediately. Same hours, same clients, same deadlines, but less than half the money." I didn't speak again. I didn't cuss, and I didn't throw a chair, even though every muscle in my body wanted to. I just stood up, grabbed my folder, and walked out of that room. The second the heavy glass doors of the office shut behind me, my hands started shaking. I walked to my truck on autopilot, climbed inside, and just sat there in the silence. The steering wheel felt like ice under my palms. My mouth was dry as dust. I kept thinking mortgage, groceries, property taxes, the boys' college funds, car insurance. I am 54 years old. At 54, you don't just go out and start over. What the hell do I tell my sons? I sat there for almost an hour, staring at my own dashboard, just trying to breathe. Then I started the engine. I drove straight home, parked in the driveway, and sat in the quiet again, watching the porch light flicker. This job was supposed to be the one thing I could count on. I joined Copley Systems back in 2016. We were 10 people jammed in a shared office space over in Spokane Valley. We had crappy carpet, bad coffee, and no air conditioning for half the year, but we were tight. We were hungry. Everyone pulled their weight. It didn't matter what your title was. You either got the job done or you didn't. I thrived in that environment. During my first year, I worked every single holiday. I slept under my desk during a 3-day server crash just to keep the lights on for our clients. I missed my youngest son's first baseball tournament because a major deployment window shifted at the last minute. I told myself it was temporary. I told my family the same thing, but it wasn't. By 2021, I was managing 8 major enterprise clients. Over 60% of our service revenue came directly through my pipeline. I was the guy they called at 2 a.m. when a client was furious, when a database corrupted, or when a project scope ballooned overnight. I made things work. I always did. Then the divorce hit in 2022. She walked out, saying she needed to find herself, and moved down to Arizona. She left me with the house, the bills, the 2 boys, and absolutely no idea how I was supposed to balance a demanding career with being a single father. My job became my anchor. It was the only thing that made me feel like I had control over my life. When Daxon Corp bought us out in 2023, they hosted a massive all-hands Zoom call. "This is about scale, synergy, and global opportunity," their CEO said, grinning like he had just saved the world. What he didn't mention was that he would walk away 6 months later with a $4 million payout. We got a new logo, and then the corporate bloat started. More meetings, more red tape, and more slide decks instead of fixing actual problems. The layoffs started slow. First the administrative assistants, then operations, then middle managers. No explanations were ever given. Just calendar invitations labeled status update. My team dropped from 8 people down to 2. The workload didn't change though. I was fielding calls at 10 p.m., apologizing to clients for software bugs I hadn't even been briefed on. I started doing back-end fixes myself at 3 a.m. because we didn't have enough developer support left. The stress was eating me alive. I was snapping at my kids, falling asleep at red lights, and my hands would shake when I typed. But I stayed. I stayed because I believed loyalty meant something, but loyalty is only useful to the people who are cashing the checks. When the cuts came, they didn't touch Gerald Vance or his circle of yes men. They came for the people who actually did the work. They came for me. The second I realized they were done pretending I mattered, the panic started to turn into something else. I went inside my house, poured a glass of water, and just stood by the sink staring at my reflection in the microwave door. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Roger Davis. I hadn't heard from Roger since he resigned from Copley Systems 6 months ago. He was a smart guy who saw the writing on the wall before anyone else, I answered. Walter, have you checked LinkedIn today? Roger asked, skipping any small talk. I let out a dry laugh. Roger, I've been too busy trying not to drown. Well, you need to look, he said. I'm with Valiant Solutions now. They're looking for someone to lead client integration. They know what you built at Copley. They want to talk. My heart started pounding, but I kept my voice steady. They know I'm still at Copley, right? They know you are the only reason Copley hasn't lost their top 5 accounts since the buyout, Roger said. He wasn't exaggerating. I told him I'd call him back. I hung up, walked into my home office, and pulled my original 2016 Copley employment agreement from the filing cabinet. I read every single line twice. There was no non-compete clause. There was no non-solicitation agreement that covered future employment. Copley used to run on trust, and they never updated the contracts after the acquisition. That was their first mistake. I opened my laptop. I didn't download any files or copy any proprietary code. I didn't need to. The most valuable data was already in my head. Years of client relationships, contract renewal timelines, billing frustrations, and personal quirks that no spreadsheet could ever capture. I knew exactly which clients were unhappy with Daxon's new support model. I called Roger back and told him to set up the meeting. First thing tomorrow, I said. Roger gave me the details. 8 a.m. at the diner on 5th Street. Not a fancy corporate boardroom, just a quiet booth where we could talk real business. I closed my laptop, walked down the hall and looked in on my boys. They were both fast asleep. I stood there in the doorway, letting the quiet settle over me. I had two choices. I could accept the pay cut, keep taking the hits, and watch my life slowly erode, or I could stand up and remind them who actually built their business. I walked back to my desk and prepared my notes. Tomorrow I was going to Valiant Solutions. The next morning I pulled into the parking lot of the diner on 5th Street 10 minutes early. I didn't bother dressing up in a suit. I wore jeans, work boots, and a plain black polo. If this was going to be a real conversation, I wasn't going to show up pretending to be someone I wasn't. Dean Cole was already inside, sitting in a booth by the window. He didn't look like a typical corporate executive. He had his sleeves rolled up, and his black watch was probably worth more than my remaining mortgage, but he carried himself with a quiet, no-nonsense authority. He looked up as I approached, gave me a brief nod, and slid a hot cup of black coffee across the table before I even sat down. "You drink it black, right?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. Thanks, there was no fake small talk, no corporate jargon. Just two men sitting in a vinyl booth with years of industry history between us. I got straight to the point. Daxon bought Copley, gutted our delivery teams, added 2 layers of useless managers, and called it efficiency, I said. I took the hits, cleaned up their messes, and kept our largest clients happy while they ran the place into the ground. Dean didn't flinch. He just nodded slowly, taking a sip of his coffee. They told me it was a compensation realignment, I continued. But let's be honest, it was a message. And what message is that? Dean asked. That I am disposable, I said. They think because I have 2 kids and a mortgage, I'll quietly eat whatever scraps they throw on the floor. Dean reached into his leather briefcase, pulled out a thick blue folder, and slid it across the table. I opened it. The numbers stared back at me in bold print. A base salary of $178,000, a quarterly performance bonus structure, full medical, dental, and vision coverage, stock options, and a signing bonus. It was real money. It was a real future. Why this much? I asked, looking up. Because you have maintained a 94% client retention rate over the last 5 years, Dean said, leaning in. In this business, with the garbage support you've been given, that doesn't happen. The only reason Valiant hasn't been able to win over Copley's top 5 accounts is because of you. Every time our sales reps knocked on their doors, those clients told us the same thing. We stay because of Walter. Then Dean dropped the real bombshell. Our intelligence says Daxon is planning to outsource Copley's entire integration department to an offshore vendor within the next 8 months. They are slashing your salary to force you to quit so they don't have to pay you a single dime of severance. That 60% cut, that is just step 1. I sat there, the coffee suddenly tasting like ash. My throat went completely dry. Is that confirmed? I asked. We've seen the vendor bidding sheets ourselves, Dean said. They've already signed the preliminary service level agreements. That explained everything. It wasn't just corporate greed, it was a calculated, cold-blooded setup. They wanted to bleed me dry, use my reputation to keep the clients happy during the transition, and then dump me on the street without a dollar to my name. I closed the blue folder, keeping my hand flat on top of it. I will give you my final answer by 3 p.m. today, I said. Dean nodded. Take your time, Walter, but know that this offer is solid. I left the diner, climbed back into my truck, and felt a cold, hard anger settle in my chest. The panic was gone. It was replaced by a strange, sharp clarity. At exactly noon, I walked through the front doors of the Copley office. My key card still worked. The receptionist gave me a nervous, tight smile. The rumor mill in these places always runs fast. I didn't stop to talk. I took the elevator to the 4th floor, walked down the long carpeted hallway, and stepped into conference room. Gerald Vance was sitting at the head of the table, looking at his tablet. He had his perfect hair and his gleaming watch, looking like he was ready for a lunch meeting at a country club. Claire Jenkins from HR sat next to him, a folder in her lap, her eyes fixed firmly on the table. Walter, Gerald said, setting his tablet down. We need your signed agreement for the new compensation structure. I pulled out a chair and sat down directly across from them. I didn't open the folder Claire had given me yesterday. I just leaned forward. I have a couple of questions first, I said. Gerald sighed, checking his watch. Walter, this isn't a negotiation. The realignment is company policy. I smiled, keeping my voice completely flat. Who is taking point on the Grayson Global migration next month? I asked. Gerald blinked, caught off guard. That is handled, he said. It's not your concern. It is my concern, I said. The Grayson team was explicitly told I would manage their rollout. They will adapt, Gerald snapped. Are you outsourcing this entire division in 8 months? I asked. Claire shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her face going pale. Gerald didn't answer. He just stared at me, his jaw tightening. Let me ask you again, Gerald. Are you moving my team offshore? Still nothing but the hum of the fluorescent lights. I don't know what rumors you've been listening to, Walter, Gerald finally said, but we expect our employees to focus on their deliverables. I stood up, slow and steady. I'm not signing your agreement, I said, and I'm not accepting the pay cut. I am resigning, effective immediately. Gerald let out a short, mocking laugh. You can't just walk out, Walter. You are required to give 2 weeks' notice under your agreement. Actually, I can, I said. I pulled a copy of my original 2016 contract from my back pocket and pointed to the page, Section 7B. In the event of a material change to compensation or job responsibilities initiated by the employee may terminate this agreement immediately without notice. A 60% pay cut is a material change, Gerald. Claire's head shot down, her hands flipping through her own papers. Her fingers were visibly trembling. Gerald's face turned a deep, angry red. You will be hearing from our legal department, he growled. For what? I asked. Walking out of a room? I haven't downloaded a sync file. I haven't copied a single line of proprietary code. All I am taking with me is my reputation and the trust I built with those clients over the last 10 years. That belongs to me, not Daxon. I turned to Claire, slide the resignation form over. Claire didn't look at Gerald. She just slid the paper across the laminate table. I signed it with my own pen, stood up, and buttoned my jacket. You think this is some kind of power move? Gerald sneered. No, I said, walking toward the door. The power move comes next. I didn't even make it to lunchtime the next day before my phone started vibrating off the desk. 11 missed calls, all from Copley Systems numbers. The first voicemail was from one of the regional vice presidents, his voice tight and overly friendly, wanting to clarify the circumstances of my departure. The second was from someone in the corporate legal department, sounding stiff and reading from a script. The third was Gerald Vance himself. He didn't even leave a message, just let it ring twice and hung up. He was too much of a coward to say anything directly. By mid-afternoon, my personal cell phone started lighting up with names I had known like family for years. The chief information officers and IT directors at Grayson Global, Kentratech, and Lumacore, all of them were confused, all of them were angry. Walter, Grayson's director, called me, his voice booming. We were told you were leading our enterprise migration next month. Now we're getting emails from some junior representative who doesn't even know the difference between our staging and production servers. What the hell is going on? Why did we have to find out you were gone from an automated email? I let them talk. I let them vent their frustration. Then I told them the absolute truth, keeping my tone calm, measured, and entirely professional. Copley made corporate decisions that I could no longer stand behind, I said. I had to make a choice and I chose to leave. That's all I can say right now. They got it. You could hear the immediate shift in their voices, that quiet pause where anger turns into understanding. They knew what Daxon was doing to the company. They had seen the quality of service drop over the last year. They knew my departure was the final nail in the coffin. Then the text messages started coming in from my former team members, or what was left of them. Devin and Jesse, the only two integration specialists I had left before I resigned, sent me screenshots of their internal Slack channels. It was complete chaos. Gerald Vance was flailing. He was assigning multi-million-dollar client accounts to brand new staff members who barely knew how the software was configured. He was telling major clients that someone would circle back with them by the end of the week when those clients had system-critical issues that needed to be resolved immediately. Devin texted me that Gerald had just assigned the LumaCore database migration to an entry-level analyst. LumaCore is a $400 million account. I replied to Devin's text with 5 words, check your email in 1 hour. I had already spoken to Dean Cole at Valiant Solutions about Devin and Jesse. I told him they were the best integration guys in the Pacific Northwest and that they were currently being worked to death for below-market pay. Valiant didn't hesitate. By 4 p.m., official job offers were sent to both Devin and Jesse. The offers included a 25% salary increase, standard 40-hour work weeks, and actual support teams. Both of them accepted before the sun went down. At 6 p.m., I received an email on my personal account from Claire Jenkins, the HR representative. The subject line read, "Professional courtesy violation." It was an incredibly bold move, considering she couldn't even look me in the eye in the conference room 24 hours earlier. She wrote that it had come to HR's attention that my sudden departure had not followed best practice professional norms and had caused operational disruption. She added that Daxon expected better professional conduct from a senior employee. I didn't flinch. I didn't get angry. I just hit reply, attached a PDF copy of my signed 2016 Copley employment contract with Section 7B highlighted, and carbon copied the entire corporate legal team at Daxon. I wrote a single line. Please refer to Section 7B regarding immediate termination of employment in the event of employer-initiated compensation reduction. Have a nice week. I hit send. It has been complete radio silence from HR ever since. They wanted me to slide out the back door quietly. They expected me to bow my head, accept their crumbs, and hand over my client accounts with a smile. Instead, I walked out, took my team, and let the house of cards fall. By day 3 at Valiant Solutions, I was finally starting to breathe normally again. I had my security keycard, my new high-performance laptop, and my Slack login. It was a real professional setup. I wasn't sitting in some cramped corner with a folding chair next to a noisy printer like I had been for the last 6 months at Copley. The atmosphere was completely different. People were focused on solving problems, not building weekly status slides to justify their existence. I was sitting at my desk, looking over Valiant's integration templates, when my personal cell phone rang. The screen displayed an unknown number with a Houston area code. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me swipe the screen to answer. "Walter Fletcher," I said. "Walter, this is Martin Daxon," the name hung in the air, no assistant, no buffer. The CEO of the multi-billion-dollar parent company Daxon Corp. was calling my personal cell phone directly. This was a man I had only ever seen in pre-recorded investor videos and photo ops with local politicians. The fact that he was calling me meant the damage had finally reached his desk, and he was realizing how badly Gerald Vance had messed up. "I have been made aware of some significant client instability following your departure," Martin Daxon said, skipping the pleasantries. "There is a lot of concern here about client movement and active poaching of our staff." I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the Portland skyline. "I didn't poach anyone, Martin," I said, keeping my voice level. "I resigned. My clients and my team decided to follow me. That isn't illegal. That is called loyalty." Martin Daxon paused on the other end of the line. The silence lasted for 3 long seconds. I could hear the faint murmur of traffic from his office in Houston. "Gerald tells me a different story, Walter," he said, his voice dropping into a lower, slightly harder register. "He claims you walked out in the middle of a critical transition and took proprietary client data with you." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was the same corporate playbook they always used. When you expose their incompetence, they try to paint you as a thief. Gerald offered me a 60% pay cut in a windowless room with no notice, Martin, I said. He did it while hiding the fact that Daxon has already signed vendor bids to outsource our entire department by Q4. He wanted me to work for scraps while training my own offshore replacements, keeping the clients calm until the trap snapped shut. You think that's leadership? You think I was going to sit there and let him rob me of my severance and my dignity? More silence. Martin Daxon was a billionaire because he was good at numbers, and he was currently calculating the cost of what was happening. If Grayson Lumicor and Kentratech walked, that was over $12 million in recurring annual revenue gone. What would it take to bring you back, he asked. I smiled, leaning forward and resting my elbows on my desk. You think this is about money? I asked. Everything is about money, Walter, Martin said. That's how the world works. Maybe your world, I replied, but not mine. To me, this is about respect. It's about the 10 years of my life I gave to Copley, working weekends, missing my kids' games, sleeping under desks to fix server crashes. I gave you my loyalty, and when you took over, you treated it like a liability. You thought because I was 54, I had nowhere else to go. You thought you owned me. We'd be willing to match Valiant's offer, Martin said, ignoring my point. In fact, we can beat it by 15%. We can put it in writing today. No, I said, a 20% increase, Martin pressed, plus a guaranteed retention bonus at the end of the year. Still no, I said. Martin's voice lost all of its warmth. Then what is it you want, Walter? You're costing us millions in client revenue. Here is what I want, I said, keeping my tone perfectly flat. I want you to stop treating the people who are still at Copley like garbage. I want you to fire Gerald Vance, because he is an incompetent climber who is going to destroy whatever is left of that division. And I want your legal department to stop sending me threatening letters about professional courtesy violations, because if they send one more, I will have my attorney file a formal complaint with the Department of Labor for constructive discharge, and I'll make sure the local media in Spokane gets a copy of those offshore vendor bids you tried to hide. There was a long, heavy pause on the line. I could hear Martin draw a slow breath. This conversation never happened, he said. Fine by me, I replied. He hung up without saying another word. I set my phone down on my desk, took a deep breath, and let it out slow. The weight that had been sitting on my chest since that meeting with Gerald and Claire was completely gone. I cracked my knuckles, opened my laptop, and got back to work. My first week at Valiant Solutions was a revelation. On Friday, Dean Cole organized a welcome lunch for me, Devin, and Jesse. We sat in a bright modern restaurant downtown, eating real food and talking about actual project strategy. There were no slides, no corporate buzzwords, and no one trying to prove they were the smartest person in the room. Dean looked at me over his glass. We're glad to have you here, Walter, he said. The team already feels different with you leading the integration process. I thanked him, but I knew the real test was coming. The following Monday, the phone calls started again. This time, they weren't Copley managers or HR reps. They were the clients. Lumicor was the first to make a move. Their director of technology, a guy named Marcus who I had worked with for 5 years, called me directly at Valiant. Walter, he said, we had a call with Gerald Vance this morning. It was a disaster. He tried to explain the delay on our database migration, but he couldn't answer a single technical question. He kept saying his team would circle back. We don't have time for someone to circle back. Our systems go live in 3 weeks. If you aren't managing this, we are pulling our contract. I didn't try to sell him on Valiant. I didn't have to. I just told him the truth. Marcus, I am at Valiant now, along with Devin and Jesse. We know your database structure inside and out. If you move your contract over here, we can start the migration tomorrow, and I guarantee we will hit your go-live date. Marcus didn't hesitate. Send me the paperwork, he said. By Tuesday afternoon, Lumicor had officially terminated their agreement with Copley Systems and signed a new contract with Valiant. Copley's account managers tried to offer them a 30% discount to stay, but Marcus told them that a discount doesn't fix a broken server. By the end of the month, Kentratech and Grayson Global followed. Grayson's migration was particularly complex, and without Devin and Jesse, Copley had no one left who understood their legacy APIs. They were terrified of a system failure, and they knew that the only way to guarantee a smooth transition was to bring their business to Valiant. In less than 30 days, we had moved over $8 million in client accounts from my old employer to my new one. I heard through the grapevine that the halls of Copley Systems were in complete panic mode. Gerald Vance was running around the office, trying to find someone to blame, He tried to claim that I had stolen client files, but Daxon's legal team shut him down. They had run a full audit on my work laptop and found nothing. I hadn't copied a single file. I had just walked out with my own mind and the relationships I had spent a decade building, and there was absolutely nothing they could do about it. 6 months later, I sat in my new office on the 12th floor of the Valiant Solutions building. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, a desk made of real wood, and a view that looked out over the Willamette River. I had a new title, Director of Client Integration. I had 18 people reporting to me, including Devin and Jesse. I was still showing up early, and I was still staying late when a project actually demanded it. But there was a massive difference now. The grind paid off, the work I did was respected, and the people cashing the checks actually knew what my job entailed. My boys were sleeping easier. So was I. During my first 4 months at Valiant alone, 5 of my old clients left Copley Systems. I didn't send them a single sales email. I didn't pitch them. I didn't have to. They reached out to me on my personal phone or through LinkedIn. Walter, they would say, we're not getting any responses from the new Copley support team. Our tickets are sitting there for days. Are you still managing integrations at Valiant? Can we migrate our entire infrastructure over to your team? Copley tried to scramble. They slashed their pricing, offering ridiculous, desperate discounts to keep the remaining clients from walking out the door. But it didn't matter. In the enterprise software business, a discount doesn't mean anything if your system is offline and your clients are screaming. Relationships and reliability beat discounts every single time. And the clients knew that as long as I was leading the team, their systems would work. I kept tabs on Copley through a few former colleagues who were still stuck there, waiting for their stock options to vest. The fallout from my resignation and the departure of Devin and Jesse had completely crippled their integration department. Claire Jenkins, the HR representative who had sat in that conference room pretending she was doing me a favor, got quietly moved to another division. They put her in a generic internal development role, which is corporate speak for a dead-end position where she couldn't do any more damage. As for Gerald Vance, he didn't last 4 months after I left. The board pushed him out after he failed 3 major client migrations in a row and tried to bluff his way through a technical software demo for a prospective client. Apparently, he couldn't answer basic questions about data encryption and got caught in a lie during the live presentation. They let him resign to save face, but everyone in the industry knew he was fired for incompetence. The offshore outsourcing plan that Daxon Corp had been planning so carefully was quietly shelved. I heard from a manager who was still inside Copley that the contracts with the offshore vendors were canceled because Daxon realized they didn't have any domestic staff left who could actually train the overseas team. By trying to squeeze me out to save a few dollars in severance, they ended up losing their biggest clients and destroying their entire delivery model. I even ran into Vernon, my very first boss at Copley Systems, at a tech conference in Portland. He had retired 2 years ago, and he looked relaxed and healthy. He spotted me from across the convention hall, walked through the crowd, and gave me a big handshake. "They did you dirty, Walter," he said, shaking his head. "I saw the emails. I'm glad you landed on your feet." I smiled at him. "Vernon, I didn't land," I said. "I jumped." And that was the absolute truth. The money at Valiant is great, but the freedom is even better. I work remotely 3 days a week. I pick the client projects I want to lead. I don't have to sit through useless meetings designed to help middle managers justify their salaries. I don't miss the constant, exhausting grind of my last 2 years at Copley. I only miss the version of myself that used to think grinding was the only way to be seen or valued by a company. The real win wasn't the higher salary or the nicer office. The real win was the power of saying no. Saying no to being devalued. Saying no to eating dirt with a smile on my face just because I had bills to pay. Saying no to giving another year of my life to people who thought I was too old to walk away and start over. Now, I actually make it to my son's weekend baseball games. I help them with their homework at the kitchen table. We eat dinner together as a family, sitting at an actual dining table, not in the front seat of my truck in an office parking lot. I sleep more than 4 hours a night. My hands don't shake when I type anymore. I still work hard because that is just who I am. That will never change. But now, I do it for people who know what I bring to the table. I do it for a company that respects my experience. I used to think that loyalty to a company was everything. I thought if I gave them everything I had, they would protect me when the time came. Turns out, self-respect matters a whole lot more. Companies don't have feelings and they don't have memories. They only have balance sheets. If you are sitting at your desk right now, feeling the stomach-turning panic of a job that is slowly gutting you, thinking that you don't have any options because of your mortgage, your age, or your kids, hear this. You do have options. You are the one who builds the value, not the managers sitting in the corner offices. And sometimes all it takes to change your life is one phone call to burn the whole cage down.